Factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. So when you see it and it says ax squared, that means a is probably not assumed to be 1 at this point. So these are going to be a little bit different than what we did in the last lesson, but hopefully not too much harder. All right, so today, to be successful, you need to be able to factor a polynomial using the greatest common factor of the terms of the polynomial. You need to be able to factor polynomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, and you need to be able to explain how to use a, b, and c to find binomial factors of a polynomial ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, there's no new vocabulary and there's no key concepts that are different than what we learned in the previous lesson, so we're just going to jump right in. Example 1, factor. Factor 5x squared plus 15x plus 10. Hopefully as soon as you look at that, you notice that these are all multiples of 5. So the first thing you want to do is factor out your greatest common factor. So what does each of these have in common? Well, a 5. So let's factor out a 5. So I have 5 times x squared. 5 goes into 15, 3x, and 5 goes into 10, 2 times. All right, now we can factor like we did before. So we're going to bring down the 5. That's still part of the expression. Now we have x squared, so we're going to do x times x. What multiplies to give us 2 and adds to give us 3? That would be 2 and 1. Those are your only factors of 2, so that one's easy to do. And then you can see that this is in factored form. So again, this is in standard form. This is in completely factored form. All right, B part says 2x squared plus 14x plus 12. Again, hopefully you notice that those are all even numbers, which means you can factor out a 2. 2 will be your greatest common factor. So I've got 2 times x squared. 2 goes into 14x, 7x times, and 2 goes into 12, 6 times. All right, again, I'm going to bring down my 2. That's part of my expression. And I'm going to now factor x squared into x times x. What multiplies to give me 6 and adds to give me 7. So again, 6 and 1. Both of these have to be plus in order to work. Now, you can do FOIL or distributive property, multiply these back together. It's going to give you this, multiply that by 2, and you can see you got what you started with. So these are easy to check as well. Again, factored form is another way to write this from standard form. So standard form goes from your highest degree to your lowest. Your degree, remember, is your exponents. And this is considered factored form. All right, C says 3x squared minus 6x minus 24. Again, 3 is your greatest common factor. I'm going to pull out a 3, so I have x squared. 3 goes into negative 6, negative 2 times, and 3 goes into negative 24, negative 8 times. All right, now I need to completely factor. Bring down my 3. It's part of my expression. X times x gives me x squared. What multiplies to give me negative 8 and adds to give me negative 2. So I know since this is a negative 8, I'm going to have a positive and a negative sign. So I'm going to have both a plus and a minus sign. Now, what multiplies to give me 8? If you want to look for your factors of 8, it's going to be 1 and 8, 2 and 4. 2 and 4 are 2 apart. Now, I need a negative 2. That means my bigger number has to be negative. My smaller number has to be positive. So I'm going to have x plus 2 and x minus 4. Now, you could have the factors switched, but you cannot have the signs switched and not the numbers. So what I'm saying is, if you have 3 times x minus 4 times x plus 2, that again is equivalent to this. But if you had x minus 2 and x plus 4, that would be incorrect. So again, you can multiply, make sure you did this correctly. But if you look for the sign in the middle, that tells you what the bigger number, what the sign of the bigger number is. So if the sign in the middle is positive, well, in this case, they're both positive, but if it were a positive and a negative, they would have opposite signs, but the bigger number would have a positive. This one has a negative in the middle, so the positive has to go with the smaller number. Again, the better you are with multiplication, the easier factoring will be because you just see those number patterns, what goes together. All right, moving on to example 2. All right, factoring ax squared plus bx plus c when a and c are positive. All right, so if you look at example 2, 4x squared plus 13x plus 3. So first, we always look for a greatest common factor. There is no greatest common factor here. You also should notice that a is 4 this time and not a 1. So you can't just say x times x is x squared. We're going to have to do this a little bit differently, but it's not very difficult. So, all right. So here's how we do factoring when it's in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, so we're going to do a times c. So we're going to multiply a times c, and then we're going to add to get b. All right, so we're still going to do the same similar process, but this time we have to multiply a times c. All right, so if we multiply a times c, 4 times 3 is 12. And that's going to give us what our middle term is going to be. So we're going to have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4. All right, so we got to remember that we've got a 13x here. So 1 and 12 is going to be 13 apart. So that's what we're going to be looking for. And so we're going to have a plus 1 and a plus 12. All right, now we can't just stick those in as factors because, again, we have to account for this 4 in the front, the leading coefficient of 4. All right, so I'm going to bring down my 4x squared. I'm going to rewrite my 13x as 1x and 12x. Since 4 and 12 have a common factor, I'm going to put my 12x first. So I've got 12x plus 1x, and then I'm going to bring down my 3. So the only thing I did was rewrite my middle term, 13x, as 12x and x. And that's because when I multiply AC, I got 12. And I need to add to get B, which is 13. All right, now I have 4 terms. 4 terms is good because that means I can group 2 and 2 together. All right, if I do that, I have 4x squared plus 12x. I'm going to factor out my greatest common factor of each. So I'm going to pull 4x out of my first binomial. 4x out of the first term leaves me with just x. And 4x factored out of the second term, 4x out of 12x is going to be plus 3. All right, if I look at my second binomial, x plus 3, the only thing I can factor out would be a 1. And I'm still left with x plus 3. All right, now when I look at this expression, now I have 2 of these that say x plus 3. That is my greatest common factor. So I'm going to factor that out. And what do I have left? 4x plus 1. All right, so again, this is a little bit more complicated, a couple more steps, but it's not difficult at all once you learn the process. So you can check it, x times 4x, 4x squared. X times 1 is 1x plus 12x. 1 plus 12 is 13x. 3 times 1 is 3. So if you multiply the two binomials together, you can see that it equals what standard form was in the beginning. So to go from standard form to factored form, these are the steps that you will need to take. All right, so this takes practice. So let's look at another example, 3x squared minus 7x plus 2. First thing, I'm going to bring my 3x down, and I'm going to bring my 2 down. And then I'm going to have to factor this. So I need to do a times c. 3 times 2 is 6. Find my factors of 6, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. I need a negative 7 here. So to multiply to get a positive 2 on the end, I need the same sign. So I'm going to have 2 positives or 2 negatives. Since I need a negative 7 in the middle, I know that both of these terms have to be negative. So negative 1 and negative 6 give me 7, negative 7. Negative 2 and negative 3 give me negative 5 when I add them together. So that will not work. So I'm going to use negative 1 and negative 6. So I'm simply bringing down my first term, bringing down my last term, and I'm going to rewrite the middle as negative 1x and negative 6x. So negative x, negative 6x. All right, so negative 1 and negative 6 give me negative 7. Again, I just rewrote that. Now I have 4 terms. Again, when I have 4 terms, I can factor out my greatest common factors. 3x squared minus x has a GCF of x. I'm going to be left with 3x minus 1. You have to have the minus 1 as a placeholder, okay? Negative 6x plus 2. I'm going to factor out a negative 2. And I'm left with 3x. Negative 2 times 3x is negative 6x. Negative 2 factored out of positive 2 is negative 1. Again, that's your placeholder. All right, bring out your greatest common factor, 3x minus 1. And then you're left with x minus 2 as your second factor. Again, it's easy to multiply. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x minus 1x. So negative 6 and minus 1 give me negative 7x in the middle. Negative 1 times negative 2 gives me a positive 2, because when you multiply two negatives, you always get a positive number.